This episode is sponsored by yet another incredible company that I stand behind fully, and that is Bubs Naturals. Now, I've not only used Bubs products for 4 years now, but I've also had the founder, Sean Lake, on the show twice. And they are offering you, the audience of the Behind the Shield podcast, 20% off your entire order, and I will give you that code in a moment. Now, Bubs has a very powerful backstory. Glenn Bub Doherty is one of the 2 Navy SEALs killed protecting the CIA facility in Benghazi. And wanting to honor his best friend, Sean stood up this company. Now, it began with their flagship product, which is their collagen. And I have to say, as a Brit with really dry skin who's now 51, I cannot underline the importance of collagen in your diet. I have seen a huge positive impact on my skin, nails, hair, and most importantly, digestive system. Another thing that I use religiously is their MCT creamers. That's the part of coconut oil that is good for our brain. And they come in dairy and non-dairy, depending on your diet. Now, I started taking Bub's latest product, creatine, about 3 months ago. And that was primarily because it's been proven to improve cognition and brain health. But not only did I witness that, I also saw an improvement in my performance, my lean muscle mass, and even a reduction in inflammation and sports injury pain. Now, in addition, Bubs makes apple cider vinegar gummies, vitamin C, and their hydration product, Hydrate or Die. And several of these products are also NSF certified, which is the highest level of certification as far as efficacy and cleanliness. Now, one of the most important elements of this company, in my opinion, is that they are a social business, meaning 10% of their profits go to charity, and in this case, that is the Glenn Doherty Foundation. Now, as I mentioned before, they are offering you, the audience of the Behind the Shield podcast, 20% off your entire order if you use the code BTS at bubsnaturals.com. And if you want to hear more about the products, the backstory, and how Sean used Glenn's story to help other veterans, listen to episodes 558 and 1055 of the Behind the Shield podcast. Welcome to the Behind the Shield podcast. As always, my name's James Gearing, and this week it is my absolute honor to welcome on the show Dr. Pam Kryskow and Phil Daines from Roots to Thrive. Now, in this conversation, we discuss a host of topics, from Pam's journey into the Wildland Fire Service, her transition into medicine, Phil's journey into becoming a psychedelic practitioner, using psychedelics to help first responders, the creation of Roots to Thrive, ketamine therapy, forging resilience, and so much more. Now, before we get to this incredible conversation, as I say every week, please just take a moment. Go to whichever app you listen to this on, subscribe to the show, leave feedback, and leave a rating. Every single 5-star rating truly does elevate this podcast, therefore making it easier for others to find. And this is a free library of over 1,200 episodes now. So all I ask in return is that you help share these incredible men and women's stories so I can get them to every single person on planet Earth who needs to hear them. So with that being said, I introduce to you Dr. Pam Kryskow and Phil Daines. Enjoy. Well, Phil and Pam, I want to start by saying 2 things. Firstly, thank you to our mutual friend, Steve Farina, for making this introduction. And secondly, I want to welcome you both onto the Behind the Shield podcast today.
Great to be here. Thanks, James.
Yeah, thank you, James. And thank you, Steve, for the intro.
Well, let's start with you individually. Pam, where are we finding you on planet Earth today?
Yeah, today, usually you find me on Cortes Island in British Columbia, but today I happen to be in Washington State doing some speaking. But yeah, my home is in British Columbia and on the unceded territory of the Klahoos First Nations.
Brilliant. And Phil, what about you?
I am at home today on Vancouver Island in a little town called Ladysmith in British Columbia, and that's the traditional unceded territory of the Stamanis First Nation.
You have a snowboard in the background, but one of my Canadian friends told me that the snow has been awful recently. Have you got any around you?
It actually, interestingly, in the last 2 weeks or so, they've got a pretty good sized dump on Mount Washington, which is about an hour and a half from us, but haven't made it up yet.
Okay, gotcha. All right. Well, I'd love to start at the beginning of each of your timelines. So let's start with you, Pam. Tell me where you were born and tell me a little bit about your family dynamic, what your parents did, how many siblings.
Wow. Okay. Fantastic. Yeah, I was born in Edmonton, Alberta, in Canada. I never really lived there at all, but I'm the oldest of three girls. So there's a 12-year spread between me and my youngest sibling. I'm an aunt 9 times over. I've got 9 nieces and nephews, and no children myself because I am too selfish. I like freedom. And my parents, fantastic couple, Elaine and Dave. My mom went to school for radio broadcast and then did a whole lot of other things. And my dad was an NHL hockey player. And so that really defined our lives as we moved around North America, depending on where training camp was, what team he was playing with. And then when we finished all that, we landed in northern Alberta in a small little town where I finished high school and then went on to university after that. So that gets me to that far.
When we talk about ice hockey, and especially in the mental health space, there's a lot of conversations about not only, trauma and childhood trauma, but also TBIs and concussions. Mm-hmm. When you reflect back now, I'm assuming that probably wasn't as much of a discussion when your dad was playing. Mm-hmm. Were there any kind of issues or struggles he had back then as a consequence of what he did for his sport?
Yeah, well, that's really interesting because I'm actually, we're at the beginning steps of working with the NHL players, alumni on this. And we have a number of folks that we've been working with on a couple things, some microdosing, preliminary stuff working. But yeah, back in the day when my dad played hockey, they didn't wear helmets, or they chose to wear helmets. They didn't wear mouth guard, they didn't wear anything. And in fact, they liked the freedom. And we were just having a big conversation about this, is that there was a lot more respect on the ice about that. Like there wasn't all the dirty play with the sticks. People were a lot more careful. And if you threw a punch, you threw a punch, and you fought to the end, right? You weren't fighting ridiculously because of all the protection that they were wearing. But as a result, with folks like my dad, who, the alumni there, but also hockey players and rugby players, and we're seeing that huge uptick in CTE, which not only is showing up as early dementia, but is also showing up as a high level of depression, high level of anxiety and social anxiety, and a high level of alcohol use disorder. And so we're really trying to help get a leash or get a connection to these players, because it's actually fixable. If we can get them into psilocybin or ketamine sessions, what happens, they start regaining some of the function. They get the immediate antidepressant effect. And then the longer term microdosing has been showing some really great promise. So we have a lot of players who are now alumni, because now they can talk about it. When you're a professional athlete, you cannot talk about using these medicines. And so, yeah, I could talk all day on that, but I won't. But it's a really exciting area, and these guys are suffering. So a lot of these men who are in their 60s and 70s, a lot of them are sitting at home, watching sports and drinking a lot, and that's their life, rinse, repeat, day after day, and they're socially isolating because of the anxiety.
I had Clint Vinaychuk on the show, who was the goalie that got his throat cut open on national television, and prior to that, he was an enforcer as well, I think, or that kind of player, at least not an enforcer because he was a goalie, but and his struggles with alcoholism and depression, it's the same thing. And you look at, MMA, you look at boxing, you look at rugby, you look at football, and then you look at the impact of sleep deprivation on the first responders, which mimics TBI. The myelin sheath gets broken down. And, when you're talking about that retiree, whether it's a sport or a first responder or a veteran, it's the same kind of image. So I think that this is so applicable across the board of everyone that's listening. But the hope that there are solutions. You know, when I was young in, early medicine, like science, we were told that the brain, once you broke it, you broke it. That was it. But now we're understanding neuroplasticity and that you can actually come back from some of these injuries.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, that's exactly what we were taught. Basically at 25, you were done. That's what you had. That was your brain. And now it's so exciting. Like, that's what I love about science, is it's always evolving. We're never done as we advance. Every time we advance and every time we get better information, we have to pivot and we have to kind of clean the slate of what we thought we knew, because we're really just truly toddlers when it comes to this science, which is exciting.
Why is it that when it comes to the humility needed to say the way that we thought things went, it has changed, it's not actually as we thought it was? Why is it such a struggle for communities like science or, politics or, my profession, when we get to a point where we realize the way we do it isn't working? I see it's so hard to get people to steer the ship to a different direction. What have you seen as far as the struggles of saying we were wrong, and that being okay because we did the best with what we had before, but there is a better way of doing it now?
Yeah, well, and I think that really ties into the whole thing about Roots to Thrive and what we've been doing at Roots to Thrive is I think of all of us, we kind of live in as a bell curve, right? There's always at the front of that bell curve, there's the edge runners, or the courageous people, the ones that are grabbing and going like, hey, this is new, this is exciting, this is where the innovation is. And it's the same in medicine and science. At the front of that is where all the innovation and all the fun is. That's where Roots to Thrive likes to play, is like, how can we use the best science and the best techniques to help people so that they can get back to their lives and do what they really want to do. And then a good portion of scientists and doctors and nurses are kind of in that middle. Some are more on the middle front where they're leaning in, they're interested. And then there's a whole group that are on the backside of that. And I unfortunately think we give way too much energy to the backside, trying to convince the dinosaurs to catch up. And I think we really should just ignore the dinosaurs and run faster and go faster and innovate and just let them go extinct. One of my mentors, who is just an absolute brilliant woman, says, science only advances with every death, which means like as the old guard dies off, science advances. It's not her saying, it's actually attributable to somebody else, but she reminds me that a lot. And I think just reiterating, we have to ignore the old school, and we have to stay on the leading edge of what is best for people, what is best for innovation, and what makes a better world for everyone. And unfortunately, we seem to get stuck in that middle place and go, how do we change the stigma? How do we change minds? We don't. We leave them behind. We leave them behind and let them do whatever they do back there while we create a better world out front. And Roots to Thrive has always been that way. We've always been innovative. We have an innovative lead on our team. We research in the areas nobody else has researched. We constantly quality improve the program. And that's scientific, right? That is what scientists do. You lean forward and you go and you ask the questions no one's ever asked and go, can we do better?
Absolutely. I work with an organization that works with DARPA, and I didn't even know what DARPA was until someone educated me a couple of years ago. But any crazy idea that they have in the military or in science, they're like, I think, the Phil could fly if he just puts his snowboard on and flaps his arms. And they're like, all right, well, here's millions of dollars. Go prove that you're wrong. And if you don't, then, okay, we just discovered Wi-Fi, or we just discovered satellites, or whatever the next thing is.
Mm-hmm.
And so if we look at the front leaders of all the innovation in the world that isn't just profit-based, like, a lot of medicines, for example, that comes from that front, those thought leaders, as people that are crazy enough to believe that something is true even though no one else, believes it. So I couldn't agree more. I don't focus on the people that are pulling the opposite direction. I believe there's the middle portion that you can sway towards the front. That's who we need to focus our energy on.
Mm-hmm.
All right. Well, Phil, let's kind of walk you through. So tell me where you were born. Tell me a little bit about your family dynamic, what your parents did for a living, and how many siblings.
Yeah, thank you. And nice to hear a little bit of history about you, Pam, and get to know you on a little deeper level, hear about your family. So I was born in Portland, Oregon, to my parents, George and Leslie Dames, and I've got two siblings. I'm the youngest of three. I have a sister 2 years older than me, Amy, and my brother is named Bumper. Yes, his real name is Bumper, and he's 5 years older than me. Similar to Pam, my dad played professional football for a couple of years. He had a short stint with the 49ers and then played in the Canadian Football League for a little bit of time. So there's been an interesting, as he is aged, seeing his health be impacted by the rough sport of football and the difference in helmets when he played, and the concussion level that he had when back in the day has certainly impacted him as he's aged. We moved up and down the West Coast between Oregon and California as I was growing up, and ultimately landed in Central Oregon, and then found my way up to, married a Canadian, and found our way up to Vancouver Island in 2009. I think I touched on all the points you were looking for.
But you should really like move into your spouse a bit more, because your spouse is an amazing human.
Yeah. Thank you, Pam. Yeah. So my partner is Shannon Dames, and she's, Pam mentioned we have an innovation lead on our team, and that is Shannon. She's both Pam and Shannon are very true innovators in this field. And I believe, they are, absolutely leaders in this field and not afraid to run ahead and innovate. And Shannon studied resilience at the University of Calgary, and Roots to Thrive was essentially born out of the research that she completed. She's a nurse by trade, and was very curious and intrigued by the level of burnout that nurses were experiencing in her work, and wanted to study it as to what was the root cause of the burnout and why were nurses dropping like flies in the different hospitals that she worked in. And so the Roots to Thrive was born out of that research, and ultimately she created a resilience program, which was Roots to Thrive. After it was created, after a little while, was connected to Pam, and the innovative idea of what if we took that resilience program and wove in ketamine assisted therapy, what would that look like? So her and Pam, I remember the early conversations, and just listening to the two of them talk on the phone or on Zoom and hearing them go back and forth. I was like, wow, watch out. These two are going to do something pretty amazing. Shannon has been a huge part of this organization and continues to be. And I get to take all the innovative ideas that the two of them have and the rest of our team and just kind of operationalize them. That's where I get to step in. So it's an absolute pleasure to get to witness not only the team work together, but then the impact that our program has on individuals that come through the different programs.
What were the elements that she identified were causing burnout in nurses?
I wish she was here to answer these questions, because she could answer them way better than me. Really, the root of it, and the root of our program essentially is authentic connection, community, having a space where individuals can just show up as they are, and they're going to be received and held in compassion. So there are different work environments that some folks would consider toxic. And in those toxic environments, burnout just eventually happens. So a common term that we use in our program, and one that she used in her research quite a bit, was unconditional positive regard. So when you are in relationship with others and you are held in unconditional positive regard, that is a a very powerful mechanism to avoid burnout. And in our program, and what her research showed was that when you can be in those spaces where you feel safe enough to show up as you are, regardless of what's happening in your life, be held and kind of mirrored unconditional positive regard, it's an incredibly powerful tool to increase resilience, whether in a personal setting or a professional setting.
In the 9 years I've been doing this and 1,200 plus episodes now, one of the things that really, I wouldn't say debunked is the right word, but one of the things that became far more prevalent in the mental health conversation wasn't the calls that these men and women had seen. It was unaddressed childhood trauma. Sleep deprivation was a massive one, but then organizational betrayal. Mm-hmm. And you have these men and women that wear, the patch on their shoulder, and they literally would die for a complete stranger, God forbid it came mm-hmm. across that. And then their own tribe turns their back on them, or their own tribe throws them under a bus. So it doesn't surprise me for a second that it was the organizational side that really was where she dialed in, because you can be the most passionate first responder and use all the correct tools, but if the environment that you're in is one of betrayal, mm-hmm. whether that's actually you did everything right and then you got used as a scapegoat, or it was just simply you're being worked into the ground and no one's advocating for you. Mm-hmm. I think that's one of the most unspoken elements of first responder trauma.
Mm-hmm. And back to that, I want to say, one thing that I know is, because I was a first responder and then I went into medicine, is that the reality is what drives us to even get those jobs comes from our childhood, right? It comes from, I'm not good enough, I'm not smart enough. If I just get this job, then my parents will love me, or my dad will go, attaboy, son, way to go. Like, there's just so much of that drive. Like, when I got hired on the fire department, those were the stories. Like, people like, yeah, you could just feel it in the gut. Or when we were going to calls sitting in the back of the truck talking, that was so present there. What was the drive to get there, to be a hero? Same in medicine, medicine has the same thing. And so it's so interesting, like these feelings of deficiency that we grow up with drive us to accomplish. But then there has to be a place where you can heal that stuff, so you can just accomplish just to be a great human, and just to be in service to humanity. So it's ubiquitous across nursing, medicine, firefighters, police officers, paramedics, all the heroes of our society that are really in service to humanity. It's so common. Not everyone, there's always exceptions. But then when you layer on that, like you've worked so hard to get into that profession, and then you start having nightmares, or you start feeling like as soon as you drive up to the fire hall, you're ready to puke for the anxiety, right? And then you think it's a deficiency of yourself, and it's not a deficiency of yourself. You're having a normal human reaction to your life and to your job, right? And that's what I love about like what Shannon's research brought forward, is that the only way to heal that is back in relationship, is to get back together in communities where you can talk honestly about what you're going through, and others will hear it and they won't judge you. They'll go, yeah, that's logical. I get you. That makes sense to me. And then people heal. And we've seen that over and over and over with all these professions, is that when they can come into a group and have that experience, wow, what changes happen first off. And then you add in the psychedelic therapy and it accelerates that healing, but it's already in a really strong relational container. It's not just psychedelics on their own. It's like you're there with a group of firefighters, like really digging into what needs to go, and you all love each other anyways. It's like you're accepted for who you are. So, I just think we have to remember that the reason we even got to those applications, the reason we even applied for these jobs, there's often that childhood stuff there in the basement that we really need to recognize. And probably what we should be doing, in like my own soapbox on this, is when you do get hired on the fire department or the police force or get accepted to med school, you probably should go through a psychedelic therapy program first and foremost, and then continue on into the job.
Yeah, Pam, as you're sharing, there's a past participant who's a firefighter and that came through our program, and I'm reminded of a struggle that he was having. His grandfather was a firefighter, his dad was a firefighter, so there's like an automatic, yes, I'm going to be a firefighter, and was experiencing this incredible level of like experienced trauma just through naturally being a firefighter and what he witnessed and the calls that he had to go out on. But this real tension between, can I do this and continue this legacy that's in my family, and then feeling the shame coming up around it and all the different emotions that were arising in him, and the pressure to maintain the legacy for his sons. Mm-hmm. And yeah, it's he was really wrestling with, can I continue on? Is it worth it? What do I need to do for my own mental and physical health? And I was reminded of him as you were sharing that, Pam, and so appreciate you bringing that up.
It echoes something that I've started talking about recently. Again, my understanding of all these things are just constantly evolving, but knowing now that most of us do have significant events when we were younger that have driven us to this point, whether you want to make sure someone doesn't feel the pain that you did, or you want to be the protector, or like you said, you want to have that identity, that armor. You want a job that's exciting, that's busy enough where you don't have to think about the thing beneath the thing. There's such a beautiful opportunity to say in an orientation of a fire department or a police department, the fact that you're sitting in these chairs means that you've probably been through some shit. So let's start talking about that right now. Mm-hmm. If it's buried down, it's going to be a fracture to your foundation. But if we start talking about it, working through it, whether it's talk therapy, whether it's a psychedelic journey, whatever it looks like, that becomes resilience. Mm-hmm. That becomes empathy. That becomes a superpower in uniform then, and you're going to perform at a higher level. Mm-hmm. And I like the idea of reframing mental health with a performance lens now, rather than the kind of doom and gloom, anxiety, depression, suicide, which is a real thing. But kind of like you said with the bell curve, if you forge performance at the front and everyone's hanging onto that rope, even the people in the depths are still going to be pulled in the right direction. But to acknowledge it at the front door, to get people to understand if they work through it, they will be a better first responder. Mm-hmm. I think that would be such a powerful conversation that people wouldn't feel lost and ashamed, because it would be normalized from day one then.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, completely. And just acknowledging that these are normal responses. These are not abnormal responses. Somewhere in the, in the Industrial Revolution, and especially in kind of from the, I think a lot of it came from out of World War II and stuff, like just suck it up and get back to work. You've fought for your country. Now you come back, get a job and get your white picket fence and get married and all that sort of stuff. It was kind of like, just get on with it, shove it down. And it was completely ignored. And now we're just going, we're kind of digging ourselves out of a lot of these myths. And these are normal responses. This is how a human responds to trauma. This is not a weakness. And in fact, if you're not responding, you should be worried. Like if you're not having some sort of visceral reaction or some sort of anxiety or depression or something, or nightmares, like that, there's something maybe not so normal about not having that. And what I like now is I think we are gaining momentum on the front end here, that this is not a weakness. This is not a character deficit. This is normal. And like you said, the sooner we deal with it, the sooner we lean into it, the better our life is. We keep our marriages, we keep our jobs, our kids get a great parent. We have a lot of fun, more laughter. We're not sitting in a chair, drinking beers, watching TV 24/7. We're out there living life. And, that's what we see when people lean into this work, is they get their lives back.
Absolutely. Well, I want to get to your journey into the fire service. Let's go back to Phil first. So Phil, as you were going through the high school age, what was it you were dreaming of becoming?
Yeah, thanks for bringing it back to that. I totally forgot to mention what my parents did for work. So my dad worked in finance. After he exited football, he got into he was a bond trader for a while in the Portland, Oregon area. And I really looked up to my dad when I was growing up. I was heavily involved in athletics. So there was a natural desire to follow in his footsteps. And so I was very in competitive athletics, soccer and tennis, played tennis in university down in California, and followed in his footsteps and worked in the finance field. So I either wanted to be an engineer, or, which was my grandpa, he was an aeronautical engineer, or work in finance as like a stockbroker, financial advisor. And when I was in the high school age, so I studied business and marketing in university, and ultimately landed in the finance industry directly after graduation.
Up to this point, has you had any experience with plant medicines or any other psychedelic?
No. The household I grew up in was very, very conservative. Very kind of shielded from different medicines, whether it be cannabis, LSD, all the psychedelics, just very, don't touch those. Those aren't good. Something bad might happen. So there's a lot of fear that was kind of ingrained into me, and didn't really have any exposure to it up until about 10 years ago, personally. Yeah.
And what was that change 10 years ago?
I was actually Shannon. She graduated from University of Calgary and was very, she in her words, she didn't want to walk across the stage and graduate at University of Calgary. She wanted to go to Peru and dig a little deeper into the studies of resilience. So she, and I don't think she would mind me saying this, but she did participate in ayahuasca ceremonies in Peru. Came back, and well, number one, the experience was incredible for her. The first time she really was able to be in her body and experience feeling emotions in her body for an extended period of time. So there was a very, very significant transformational experience for her to get away for 2 or 3 weeks, participate in these ceremonies, and in my mind, in the household I grew up in, it was like, holy shit, what are you doing? I don't know if you should do this. This is scaring me. But she came back significantly changed in a good way, in a very good way, healthy way. So in that, I got curious, started doing some own work on myself, not necessarily with different plant medicines, but really more of a focus on community and connection. And at the same time, I was transitioning out of the financial field, not quite sure what I wanted to do, but committed to taking a couple years off of work and spending time with our kids and having the space to really define what it is I want to do. And ultimately in that started a men's group that with a few guys here on Vancouver Island, some other fathers at my kids' school that they went to that were on somewhat of a similar path as me. And that was a real, it was heavily successful in my own path. Just having a space an intentional space where men of a similar age as myself have similar age kids, similar professions, where we could just gather around a fire with a nice structure to really connect in a meaningful way and authentically show up and share what was really coming up for us. not just be on the surface, but dip below the surface and talk about emotions and whatnot. So that really kind of launched me into this field, that the men's group work, and allowed me to embody the experience of being in a group that's focused on resilience, essentially.
Well, Pam, let's roll the clock back then. So what were you dreaming of becoming in high school, and how did that lead to the fire service?
Yeah, when I was in high school, I was actually, my first degree was criminology. So I was thinking something law enforcement or legal law, environmental law, something like that. So I did a criminology degree, and while I was doing that, I one of my best buds, he was a forestry firefighter, and he was like, "Why don't you apply? Like, you're in great shape. You've always played sports. You've always done this. Why don't you come try out and get this summer job and make some money?" Because we weren't making much money in the summer for university. And so I applied and got hired on with forestry service. So I did 4 seasons with forestry while I was getting my criminology degree, and that, of course, I was just accumulating all my skill sets, like running chainsaws and first aid and all the stuff you needed to be in forestry. And then when I finished my criminology degree, I applied to law school and got accepted. And then I kind of looked around the people that I was going to be going to law school with, and I realized they weren't my people. I was like, I don't think I want to hang out with these people for the next 4 years. So I was kind of lost, didn't really know what I was going to do. And again, another one of my guy friends said, "Well, you've got all the requirements. Why don't you apply for the city?" He was applying for city fire departments, and so he's like, "Come on, let's apply together." And so I applied for Coquitlam, and it was kind of one of the weirdest things I've ever had to do. It wasn't hard. I mean, it was stuff I was used to doing all the time, but to have all these chiefs following me around as I did each part of the physical exam was pretty hilarious in a way. And then I ended up getting hired on with Coquitlam and stayed there for 8 years, and then found that, I loved it. Coquitlam was fantastic. My crew was fantastic. They're all still great friends. In fact, Steve Farina got hired, who introduced us to you. He was hired on 18 months after me. But it's interesting because everyone I got hired on in the fire department is retired, and I'm not retired. And I won't be retired for another 15 years in medicine. So, but yeah, it was a great time, really good. But what I really found is that I was really drawn to what we were doing on the medicals when we went to medical calls, and that I was always calling up the emerge docs after and saying, "How'd that guy do? How'd that woman do?" And I kind of realized that I also didn't really want to do all the night shifts anymore. I was starting to get really, irritated with, working 14 hours a night and feeling like a sack of junk the next day. And, so I applied to medicine, and then did 36-hour shifts instead overnight. So, but it was good. It's really good. It was I'm glad I did that. And like I said, those guys are still my family. They're good brothers and surrogate dads that I have. I get to see them regularly. So,
how competitive was it to get hired back then?
It was about the same as medicine. It was about 1 hire for every 1,200 applicants. Yeah. So medicine was equal. Medicine was one person got accepted for every 1,200 applicants at the time.
Amazing.
Yeah.
We are in such a retention and recruitment crisis at the moment in our profession. And it wasn't that long ago that we weren't. It was only probably 10 years ago that it really started nosediving. And it's obvious to me what the issue is. It's, as you just talked about, only 8 years in, you're already getting beaten down by the shift work. And so not only that, but that's one of the biggest things is in America, the standard work week is 56 hours. Now, as they get more and more understaffed, you get more and more mandatory overtime. Now they're working 80 plus hours a week. And these young people are looking at this going, that sounds awful. Why would I do that when I could be a welder or a mechanic or an electrician and be home every night? Yeah. So it's a great opportunity to revisit anyone that worked, kind of a couple of decades ago to see just what it was supposed to look like. Because as you said, do you want the person who you're trusting with your life or with your health to be the bottom of the barrel. No, you want to be picking from the people that are at the top tier. So the fact that we're now begging high school kids to do this job and training them from scratch and offering hiring bonuses is the polar opposite, in my opinion, of what fire service hiring should look like. So when we fix what's broken, I think we're going to go back to where it was before. But people seem to have forgotten just how competitive it was certainly 20 years ago.
Yeah, and what's really interesting about what you're saying is because we're not dealing with the mental health crisis in first responders, is a lot of those workplaces are toxic. So they're incredibly toxic. The bullying is insane. Like when the number of stories I get from firefighter colleagues, like how many firefighters I talk to in a weekly basis and talk about their workplace. I mean, it's a lot of the workplaces are verging on illegal, like completely illegal behavior, and the workers' compensation is not keeping up. They are not recognizing that these cutting edge therapies need to be used. In fact, in British Columbia, where we are, they're blocking it. Despite the data, despite the published outcomes, they're blocking it, and it need not be that way. I mean, we could have firefighters going through 24/7 through our program and getting better, and we would see the divorce rate drop. We would see the substance use rate drop. We would see the off work time drop. It's a no-brainer. Like, even if you don't care about people, you only care about money, it's a no-brainer to do this. And and these should be, I mean, these people should be taken care of to the highest level. They are taking care of us. And as you know, the modern day firefighter is so different than before, because not only are you structure fires, but your hazardous materials, your confined space rescue, your high angle rescue, like it just add on swift water rescue. I mean, it's everything that the police don't do, the fire department does. Everything.
I literally use that exact verbiage. We are the Swiss Army knife of the first responder professions. And yet we work double what, I mean, it's funny because I've my whole career, I've heard people say, well, we want to try and make what the cops make. Now, if you're working a 56-hour work week, you're not making what the cops make. You're making what they make in only 40 hours, so 16 hours more. So you're not. So it's not about the money. My focus is just on the working conditions, but we've told ourselves so many fallacies. And I think one of the aha moments I had recently was, and because I've seen it firsthand, like locally here, we've had the county that I live in, they had 5 suicides in 5 years, another 3 attempts that were kind of swept under the rug. And I realized it because people seemed unmoved by it. Nothing has changed whatsoever. And the solutions have been given on a silver platter, everything from, what we're going to talk about today to changing the work week, investing in a 4th shift so you can actually have a healthy rest and recovery period. And it made me realize that if you are a fire chief or a police chief or a union president or a city and county council member, and your firefighters or your first responders are dying, and you still sleep soundly at night, we forget to look at the top tier with the mental health as well. Like, are you fit for duty if you are unmoved by the fact that there's divorce and alcoholism? And, so I think that's the other thing that we're not really acknowledging, is that there are a lot of people that aren't fit for duty, that are wearing chief's bugles and in political positions.
Yeah, exactly. I 100% agree with everything you said. And that again goes back to the innovation part, where Roots to Thrive is really has really thrived in the research, is because we see this. And so what we did is we had a health economist look at our numbers. And they said, for every person that comes through our program, what does it save the healthcare system? So we know that if somebody comes into Roots to Thrive, and let's say they only have a single diagnosis, they just have depression, we save the provincial healthcare system about $30,000. Like, that's incredible. Now, never mind if you layer on all the other things. They've got PTSD and anxiety and maybe alcohol use disorder. Like, it's a no-brainer. So for any city manager out there that is trying to save their city money on time off work or rehab or all the things the city has to pay. And I think every place is a bit different. Sometimes it's the fire department that has to cover it. Sometimes it's the city that covers it. Sometimes it's the workers' compensation. But even for just the bean counters, it's a no-brainer to make sure that these programs are open door ready to go, that firefighters can go right in at the first sign of losing resiliency, at the first sign of having that irritation at their spouse when they walk in the door, the first time that they start having nightmares, you get them in the door. We have a paramedic right now that's going through a program, and their worker comp has completely got it. They're back at work. And as soon as they have enough, as soon as it layers on enough and they get a check, yep, they come through the program, back on, no job loss, no time off work, no substance use disorder, marriage intact, kids got their parent. Like it's like, how can you not want to say yes, please to that when you are in that top echelon making those decisions? It's one of the easiest decisions they can make, really.
Well, this is something I've talked about recently as well. There is a victim mentality baked into our physical and mental health, which is if you are struggling, and I'll give you a perfect example, back injury. I tore 3 ligaments lifting a patient about 10, 12 years ago now. And the workman's comp process, firstly, I mean, the second physician or PA that I was presented with was about 400 pounds. And I'm like, okay, so I'm taking wellness advice from this gentleman. But they threw meds and, potentially surgery at me. And I'm like, well, no, there was an imbalance that caused me to get hurt. This wasn't a big patient or anything. This is a traumatic injury. I need to heal the injury and then heal what caused the injury in the first place. So luckily, I had enough information on my life's journey to be my own advocate and, push against what they wanted me to do. And I chose physical therapy and chiropractic and foundation training and healed my back with no pills, no surgery. But I have got friends that didn't have that, went down the surgical route, got everything fused, and then had to fight for, 2 years to get a medical disability because the system isn't set up to surround you with the right healing tools like the Thor 3 program the Green Berets have in America here to get you back into combat, get you back on the field. We don't want you to be disabled and worrying about someone with a camera taking a picture of you because you picked up dog food one time. We want you to be back to work and then you retire when you choose to retire. And it's the same with the mental health thing. The PTSD, retirement really is telling you, well, don't get better, otherwise you'll stop getting the disability money. Well, how about we focus on getting you better so that you, again, can retire with a healthy mind and then thrive into retirement as well.
Totally agree.
Yeah, I recall a conversation with an individual who's trying to get their participation covered through workers' comp. And in order for them to get it covered, they had to take on they had to, I think it was a PTSD diagnosis for a certain period of time in order to get the coverage. So they just had to take on the label of being disabled. And he was saying, I just have to be this for 6 more months and then I will get long-term disability. And there's a real incongruence there for him. And in that incongruence, it manifests in all different forms of whether it's shame or embarrassment or whatever. But yeah, it ties right into what you're saying, James, about the victim mentality that folks absorb in the struggle of getting this type of coverage approved.
Yeah, it creates the wrong mindset. It's not a healing mindset anymore. It's the opposite. So, and I've seen it. I've witnessed it with my friends. Well, Pam, you talked about transitioning into medicine. Firstly, did you have much holistic training when it came to your medical training? A lot of doctors I've had on here, when it came to nutrition, exercise, sleep, or even, it's kind of a crazy thought now that they'd be talking about plant medicine, but it probably should be in there. What was your training like? And then what was the disconnect for, a practitioner in Canada becoming a physician?
Well, what I actually had originally planned on going into naturopathic medicine is what I had. And I stumbled very luckily into a practitioner who would let me shadow her while I was still on the fire department. So while I was finishing up my science degree, so I could apply to medicine, I was doing that while I was on the fire department. And so I was working with this naturopath, and she was it was like an old school apprenticeship. I got to sit there and learn from her. And so when it got to the point that I had all the qualifications to apply for medical school, her and her husband, who was actually a healthcare administrator, both of them said, don't apply to naturopathic college. You've already got all that in your brain now. Apply to conventional medicine and you'll have both. You already have both. And you'll have more, you'll be able to influence healthcare better from within the medical system. So that was like very nice advice that people wiser than me at the time told me. So I followed that advice and went into medicine. And then when you're in medicine, you just put your head down and get through. And fortunately, we created an accountability group in medicine. So it was a bunch of us that were coming from second or third careers. There was another firefighter in my med school class as well. So we kept ourselves meeting regularly so that we held true to our values as we went through medicine so that we could come out the other end intact. And so we were the ones that lifted each other up when we were like, oh, this sucks. I'm quitting this. I can't do this anymore. Like we held there as a unit for each other so that we could get through and just keep that holistic outlook on life. We were all athletes. We were all, we ate well, we understood it, and we weren't getting that in medical school. And as a block, we could advocate for it. And if we couldn't get it through the school system, we could do it on our own. So that just really, again, speaks to community. When you're in a community, you have strength. And so as a community, when one of us was weak, the others could hold us up, and we could hold others up when they were not thriving. So we did that. And then as soon as I was out of medicine, what I did is, once you have the freedom, is then I just found the practitioners around the world that were successful. So who is the best out there? And I would contact them and say, I'm coming. I'm going to come learn from you. I want to see what you're doing because you're getting people better. So people from the nutrition field, from the athletics field. So I worked with and still do actually work with a really high level group of sports athletes that are sports practitioners that mostly work with elite Olympic and professional athletes and train. I go and train with them. I go to the same conferences as them. We learn together. And that went into a pain clinic that I had in Vancouver, where I was bringing psychedelic therapy into that pain clinic to deal with. You have the physical pain, but then you have the emotional pain. And so it was really I just co-created my learning path to go you don't want to learn from the people that aren't getting success. Like, why? I mean, if you've got a psychiatrist, one of the patients I was talking to this morning, like, we're getting them off all the medications that their psychiatrist is putting them on. And this psychiatrist, all they know is how to be a prescriber. They don't know how to get to the root of the trauma, right? So you don't want to learn from that psychiatrist. You want to learn from the psychiatrist. Like at Roots to Thrive, we have Dr. Crosby Wattler. We want to learn from the psychiatrist that gets it, that gets humans, that gets what builds resiliency, what builds healing, what builds a healthy, thriving life. And so there was, I don't know, good mentors really pushed me in the right direction with that. So having that holistic learning ahead of time and then going through medicine, and then also having this tribe of accountability folks to hold that path. And then again, finding the people that are doing it the best and learning from them. That's who you want to learn from. So, and I feel like Roots to Thrive is all of that. Like everybody on our team are people that are at the leading edge of what they do and really are experts, except the most humble and egoless folks I've ever worked with.
I just had a psychiatrist who's also a neuroscientist, Dr. Dave Rabin, on the show. He's the founder of Apollo Neuro, which is a wearable.
Yep.
But the way he presented psychiatric meds was so great. I mean, obviously, you're not talking about some of the extreme conditions that require maybe more medication, but the antidepressants, the anti-anxiety, et cetera, that most people are prescribed. The way he presented is, you've cut your arm and you're bleeding. So you put a tourniquet on it, to stabilize it until you can get to surgery. He said, well, the SSRI is the tourniquet. That doesn't mean you're supposed to wear a tourniquet the rest of your life. It's just to get you to the point where you can now get the help. And it was such a good way of reframing it. If someone is deep in depression and suicidal, maybe at that point there's an application for that just to level them off. And then now they have the ability to go to talk therapy or EMDR, or obviously, taper off it and then do a, psychedelic retreat. but that's not how it's presented. And it's the same with the hypertension med. It's the same with, diabetic med. The conversation isn't, well, we need to just use this to stabilize, to get your blood pressure out of 220 and down so you don't stroke. But we need to get your BMI down. We need to, well, that's a bad term. BMI is terrible, but your body composition down, your nutrition change, so that then you don't need these drugs anymore. But, with the psych side, it's so irresponsible because most people are given it like, well, you're going to be on this the rest of your life and you haven't fixed anything. All you're doing is just masking the symptoms.
Yeah, totally agree. And that is one of the things that we do very nicely is help people recognize that these are just tools and they don't have to have a judgment around it either. It's just a tool in the toolbox, and when that tool is no longer needed because they've helped resolve some of the trauma, they've been able to work through some of the challenges and use other techniques, and especially things that help get them back into parasympathetic, get our nervous systems re-regulated, that then maybe these medicines can slowly be weaned off and can go back into the toolbox and not be used unless needed again. And the interesting thing too, which I love, and I think when you look at all the clinical trials that are registered now at clinicaltrials.gov, is that we're also seeing how much, not only that these medicines, especially with ketamine and psilocybin, MDMA as well, is that not only are the mental health challenges resolving, but we're seeing massive changes in these other medical conditions. We've had a number of people come through our program with like mast cell dysregulation, and they're better. They're better after going through Roots to Thrive. Like they don't have any more flares. They haven't had to use their EpiPen forever. And, so these other conditions that have this physiological element, Parkinson's, people will report that their gait is longer, and the pill rolling and the tremor is starting to go down. So, it really shows how that they're both woven together. So not only will people perhaps, see these medications as now no longer needed, well, we actually do what actually is going to help the condition, but the physical health challenges is really, really interesting. And it's not surprising because it's mind, body, spirit medicine, isn't it? Like it's all connected. The head is connected to the body. That's a fact. So if the mental health is better, we know from, of course, the clinical trials too, we know that when mental health gets better, neuroinflammation drops. If neuroinflammation drops, inflammation generally is dropping. If inflammation generally is dropping, then the body can work at a higher level to fix other things, and we might start to see more physical health challenges change. So
Pam, as you're speaking about this, I'm curious if you'd be willing to say a little bit more. We did some work a couple years ago with folks suffering, like folks that had received an end-of-life diagnosis.
Yeah.
They received a Section 56 exemption through Health Canada to participate in psilocybin-assisted therapy, and we saw some remarkable outcomes on the physical health side. And I'm curious if you'd be willing to speak to that a little bit, Pam.
Yeah. As Phil said, we had quite a few cohorts of people that came through our program with psilocybin, and what's remarkable, and it's not just found in our program, but also found in the programs at NYU and Johns Hopkins, is that many of these end-of-life folks, even though they qualify to get into the program, they have to have a palliative diagnosis, which means they're likely to die in the next 1 to 2 years. And many of them don't. In fact, most of them are still doing quite well. Mm-hmm. They're like, so when this mental health level goes away, starts getting resolved. So it's not only the existential distress and anxiety and depression from an end of life diagnosis, but there's also the whole life of trauma before that even got them to that place. And as all of that stuff unlayers and starts to heal, suddenly their vibrancy grows. You see it, like you actually see it at the end of some of those sessions. Phil was a facilitator for many of them and saw that too. Is that they went in like walking in with canes and got up at the end and walked out and forgot they even had canes. Like they didn't need it, or talked about going golfing after, or in a group, like a whole group of them went surfing and camping together. Like everything shifted. And so, and talking to our colleagues like Bill Richards, who's at the NYU site, I asked him in December, not last December, but 2 Decembers, I go, are your folks dying? He's like, no. And I'm like, neither are ours. It's really interesting. So, and the physical health stuff, like they feel better in their bodies. The pain drops. The family really reports that. We got a lot of reports from their family, sisters and stuff saying it's the happiest I've seen them. Their pain has dropped. They're not using their meds anymore. Not in all cases. Like some people still have passed on. Some people didn't get, got a little bit of relief, but not full relief. But the fact that there was that much change is phenomenal. And it's interesting in Canada because it's harder to get access right now through Health Canada for a psilocybin session at end of life than it is to get MAID, medical assistance in dying. You can get medical assistance in dying, no problem. But to get access to a medicine that might make your life better, it might resolve some of that trauma, is incredibly challenging right now. And it shouldn't be.
I was gonna ask you about MAID because you were kind of talking about the end of life side. So I have seen some of the people, I don't know if I'm in an echo chamber, I don't know if it's these certain people, but the presentation, because I'm a huge, believer in euthanasia, if it's truly end of life, if you're just going to be suffering and, every day is just going to be zero quality, and be able to make that choice the same way as we're compassionate towards our animals when they get to that point. But the way that some of the people I've heard have talked about that in Canada is it's being presented irresponsibly sometimes to groups that maybe, it's not actually applicable to, rather than a last ditch end of life, nothing else is going to help, it's just going to alleviate the suffering at the other end. I think their concern was if there were mental health problems, it was almost like, well, here's your suicide option if you want it. Now, that might be, like I said, completely distorted. So what is your perception of the pros and the cons of MAID and how it's been introduced to the Canadian people?
Well, I think we all want, the first way to look at it is, what do you want? So I think about that. If I was in a place where I knew that my suffering would be just too much, or I was just too done, just done, I would want that choice personally. That's my own personal opinion. I think the way that we should be looking at MAID is you should have all options prior to it. And if you want to choose MAID, excellent, no problem. That's your choice. And if you are suffering from existential distress or depression or PTSD or chronic pain, like every option should be on the table. It should just be a hell yes. There should be no blocks. So in Canada, if I had the magic wand, if I was a health minister, I would say, if you qualify for MAID, you qualify for psychedelic therapy, period. And as much psychedelic therapy as you want, period. And you qualify for the best pain therapy, period. Like that's a no-brainer. There's just no reason to roadblock that. And I think that's what we would find, is that if we could use, again, this goes back to innovation, right? If we had the innovators making the decisions and opening up the doors and giving patients full choice of what they get, then they're going to feel better. And there's certainly going to be people that are going to go, I don't want to do psychedelics, I just want MAID. That's what I want. I'm done with this condition. I would like to go out on my own terms. But how can you not give these other options to people first and foremost? And I think that would just remove the whole debate. Because if you can have everything on the table to feel better, and you get to the end of the table and you're like, no, this is what I had. And we actually had a participant in our program that had, when they came in, they had their MAID date set. Mm-hmm. And at the end of their session, they're like, I still think I want to do MAID, but just not yet. And they went, it was quite a while. I can't remember quite, Phil, I don't know if you remember, but I think it was over a year and a half later that they decided to go ahead, and they had a beautiful celebration of life first. They were able to fully engage with their life up until that point.
Well, and we also had another one recently. I want to say 6 months ago. Came through our program, was checking the box for MAID, just to get to that point of being able to go through the MAID process. And I just saw recently that they're coming back to do what we call an alumni refresher, which is a group of 10 alumni participants coming together to do a group ketamine assisted therapy session, just one single session, and they're signed up for it. So I haven't engaged with the participant. I don't know the details, but I take that as a good sign that they're still here, coming back and doing another session.
Yeah. So there is a lot. There is a lot of stuff out there about MAID, but I think that the noise there. I just want to come back to your original question. The noise there, really, I think the focus should be, why can't they have all the options first? And then that noise will disappear, because it doesn't have to be siloed, or not siloed. It doesn't have to be this against that. It doesn't make sense. It's like, what is best for that person? So I know there's people that are pro and there's people that are anti, and I think they just need to say, no, just put your opinions inside and let's create the system where people have the choice of what they want, so that each person has a choice of what they want. So I think a lot of what you were talking about is just that noise in the system, and the noise comes because people can't have, right now, there's roadblocks for them getting psychedelic therapy.
I just watched, I think it was called Famous Last Words, if I've got that right. It's a interview that they do with people who are probably going to pass away. I would imagine there's probably a year or two, window that they do it in. So Jane Goodall was one, but they just interviewed Eric Dane, the actor that had ALS. And in that conversation, he'd mentioned that he tried all different kinds of out the box therapies, I think is how he referred to it. And he didn't say it exactly as far as euthanasia, but he implied that he had a plan if they didn't work. And then he passed away. And I don't know if that was ultimately from air quotes natural causes, or if he went through with his own plan. But that is an example. Like you said, if those are all on the table, and let's say he tried psychedelics and then got to that point, and he was adamant that once he wasn't able to really control, could speak, etc., and he lost who he was and his physicality and his ability to communicate with his loved ones, that was his own personal choice. Then that was the line. And so that's a kind of illustration exactly what you're talking about. Why would you not have access to these potential elements that would add, months or years, or, alleviate pain or whatever it is? If you're going to allow someone to ultimately take their own life, in a medical sense, why would you not then have them, give them the access to the other things that might work? That might just be the thing that was missing to turn them around.
Mm-hmm.
The thing that Pam said, allowing the patient to be in full choice. And I think that's the key piece. And we do find in our program and all of us as humans, when we are in choice, we own the decision. We're not being directed by somebody else on what we should do. And the outcomes are much better when we are in choice. So allowing the patient, the participant to make the decision, whether it's doing MAID or doing psychedelics or seeing a counselor, regardless of what it is, it's allowing them to step in choice is the right way to go.
Going back to the palliative care and people with cancer, coming from a background of basic level, street level medicine, and science and sports science. So I'm not saying I'm a neuroscientist or a physician or anything, but there's almost like an interesting perspective when you haven't been put into too much of a narrow field in medicine. You're still looking at it with a broad brush. The idea that you can kill cancer by Agent Oranging the whole body with chemo and then crossing your fingers, hoping the good cells come back, never made any sense to me. And so, with what you're talking about, knowing that a lot of cancer is coming from stress, whether it's nutritional stress, whether it's, trauma stress, trying to get as close to homeostasis again with the way you move, the way you eat, your relationships, your time in nature, etc. This application of plant medicine makes perfect sense to me. Like if I can tell you this now, knock on wood, I hope not, but if I got a cancer diagnosis, I would lean into the holistic route, because I personally think that chemo kills more people than cancer does. It just, and then their end of life usually is horrendous as well. So I hope that, advances in immunotherapy and some of these other things will be a great adjunct to the holistic side. But the kind of global chemo that we've done, it just doesn't make any sense to me. But addressing, like you said, the emotional and physical trauma through the plant medicine journeys is something that I absolutely would do, because you're ultimately then trying to find any root of inflammation, any root of stress that is, feeding the cancer ultimately, and trying to reduce or eliminate that.
Yeah. And what I think what you're saying too is making it even wider is, 60% of health we can really control. Drinking water, eating good food, moving our body, laughing, turning off the news, hanging out with people that uplift us, all of that. I remember one of my favorite cardiologists said, if we could just get people exercising, that's 60% better than any pill we can give them. Right. So we give up a lot of control. We don't need to. Anyone can take it back, but really going like, what is the hierarchy of health first and foremost? And there's a great group out of Vancouver. I've just lost the name for a minute, but it'll come in a moment. But when people get a diagnosis, the first weekend they spend with them is like, here's all the things you can do. Here's how much water you got to drink. Here's the vegetables you want to get in your body. Here's the movement, like all of the real hierarchy of health. And then down the road is, nutritional supplements, and then the medical system, whether it's surgery, chemo, etc. So we are at a time of unprecedented individualized medicine too. So we are finding I think we're going to be moving away from those chemos to more targeted gene therapy over time, but incredibly expensive, and still only people who can afford it are getting that. And I do have a patient who has leukemia, and every so many months she does a psilocybin journey where all she does is scan her body, talk to the cancer, and see what it needs, see what her body needs. And she goes in there in head to toe, and she's doing fantastic. Her numbers are fantastic. She probably really doesn't even qualify for the diagnosis anymore, but she's having that mind, body, spirit conversation. And she's also doing all the other things. She's also moving the bar in her favor on all that stuff. And that's what we need to do better in medicine, is go, when you get any diagnosis that's inflammatory, which cancer is, or degenerative, is you got to do all these things. And one of the most frustrating things I find as a physician is, back in the day in Canada, we used to have this great program that all the media had to show called Participation. And it talked about all the things you should be doing to be a healthy human. Right. And we've given up that. Like, we have these airways and social media that we don't get to really push prevention out there. And wouldn't it be nice to have, like, federally in Canada and the US, like, hey, here's prevention. Like, here is true prevention. Turn off the TV and go outside. Go play with your kids. Have you drank enough water? Like, wouldn't it be nice, instead of seeing an ad for Viagra, the ad is like, hey, go have a glass of water. So we can really change that. And I totally agree, but it's psychedelic therapy or any kind of spiritual therapy, anything, even, is going to be helpful. So, and we can do that. And a lot of people are doing it, and this again goes, I'm going to just on a soapbox a bit. This also goes back to the bell curve. Like, the front end of that bell curve in healthcare is doing exactly what you brought up, is looking at mind, body, spirit, is looking at all those elements of wellness, and the back half is really falling behind. So I'm optimistic.
Yeah, no, I am too. And one of the things that I think I like to revisit, on a lot of these conversations, is the pandemic. Because if there ever was a time where we had a captive audience and really got to impart wisdom on the holistic tools that forge health and prevention, it was 2020, 2021. and the polar opposite happened. What if you just sat down and wrote down all the things that would make people more susceptible to the virus? That's what they told you. Well, don't go outside, don't see people that you love, we'll just get fast food delivered to your house and alcohol, binge watch the Tiger King, and don't look at the sun. I mean, it was awful, and there were no lessons on the back end. And what do you do if you've got cancer? Yeah, that's one conversation, but the biggest conversation was, well, what do you do to prevent cardiovascular disease, cancers, strokes, mental health challenges? I mean, all these things are preventable. And the irony is, in a lot of, like the doctor said, if we just went back to how we existed 100 years ago, as far as how we move, what our food looks like, our community, that would be 80% of the fight right there, just rolling the clock back. And then use some of the modern, ancient plant medicines, some of the modern medicines, and infuse that. And now, my goodness, you'd have a population that was thriving. But as I've pointed out many, many times, as I sit here in America in 2026, post-COVID, where the lesson should have been a healthier nation is a more, resilient nation to disease, we're 75% obese or overweight. So no lesson was learned. And it's no wonder that we have a cancer epidemic and an opioid crisis and all these other things, because no one's actually leaning into, all the politics is still, like you said, on the back end of that bell curve, because sadly, there's a lot of money to be made in sick people.
Yeah. Well, and that's really, I think, the biggest thing. If you really wanted to be revolutionary in the US, what you would do is say, in 2 years, healthcare cannot be a shareholder value. If you really cared about people, I say, you know what? There will no longer be any for-profit insurance companies, and we are going to. I mean, I know it would, like, people's head will explode me even saying this, but saying, you know what? You can only make 10% off of pharmaceutical drugs, period. Because that's still a pretty sweet profit, and Mark Cuban's cost plus drugs has shown that in the US, right? He's making a pretty good profit just by bringing the prices down and being transparent. But the biggest challenge is it's all for profit, right? It can't be. This is a basic human right. Like, an advanced society would say healthcare is a basic human right, not a shareholder value. An advanced society would do that. And with that, innovation would matter. Health would matter, because it's your taxpayer dollars that are holding up massive CEO salaries and massive shareholder paybacks. So if you could just clean that up, you could do all this. And it's not that hard. I know it, like I said, some people's heads are going to explode with that. But the happiness factor, like, you could actually start moving towards Bhutan and grow. What does gross national happiness look like? Like, we live in a society, we live in a world right now where there is enough resources for everyone. There's enough resources for everyone to be happy. There's enough resources for everyone to be well. This division of have and have nots is artificial. Everyone could be healthy in the US. Everyone could have a great life in the US. There is no reason that it's not happening, other than we've bought into shareholder value for healthcare. And you remove that, and suddenly everyone's healthy. It wouldn't take long. I bet you it would take 10 years. And I'll probably have, a bullet on my head now.
No,
I'm not
me
the first to
first.
say
I mean,
it,
I talk
though.
about this all the time.
We know this, right? And the good thing is, in the US, there are some HMOs that are coming as nonprofits. There are some HMOs that are coming as cooperatives. So if you can find those folks and uplift them, they're fantastic, because that is the future of healthcare, is where you pool your money. This is what insurance is supposed to be, right? You pool your money, and then when you need the treatment, you get it. Right? There's not supposed to be shareholders in that equation anywhere. So how they snuck in there, I don't know, but it's time for them to go.
I've said this many times on here, like, the number of people I've had who are from different countries that have an incredible solution. So the way Norway does prisons, Finland's education system, Portugal's decriminalization of addiction. And I think that the British NHS, at its core, how it was intended to be, is such an amazing, structure for healthcare. Because if you think about it, if you've got, as you said, a pot of taxpayers' money, and that is going to when people really need it, everything from childbirth to get hit by a bus to, God forbid, you get cancer, end of life, etc., then the drive is to make the nation as healthy as possible. Let's try and use as little of this tax money as we can unless we need it. So now you have healthy British people, which was the case back in the 70s when it was really thriving. But if you have a profit-based system like America, then the inverse is true. People are sick, we're going to make the most money. If we go to war, my weapon manufacturer friends make the most money. It's just basic economics. So the moment you have a profit-based system, it's the people themselves that lose. And it kills me because, like I said, the disease that we have in this country, the unnecessary premature deaths, and just the low quality of life that so many people live. You see these obese children and it breaks my heart. Like, they're never even going to know what it feels like to be an energetic, athletic child unless they manage to turn a corner somehow. So the fact that, I think it's because we are so sick and so tired that people don't fight back and don't question it. But if you have a truly altruistic system where you just take care of each other as a nation, and that drives the health of the nation, Scandinavia is a great example, then everyone wins. Everyone wins then.
Yeah, it's sad when you when you look at the like a CEO of any for-profit organization, but specifically publicly traded organizations, their job is to increase the shareholder value or increase the stock price, and regardless of at what expense. Currently it's just at the expense of the people in different industries. And we're talking about medical specifically, but we haven't even gotten into like food and the types of foods that are out there and the different ingredients that are terrible for our health. And you look at what children are eating and consuming, and I've got a 13 and a 14-year-old, and it's a daily battle, like trying to educate them and teach them, like, don't eat the Jolly Rancher. There's recent research that there's high level of arsenic in them. Like, it's so it's a battle. That feels like it's unwinnable at this point in time. But that, tying it back to Pam's comment on innovation, this is when we need the innovation. We need shifts in policy, all those things to benefit current population, but also the up and coming generations.
I want to kind of springboard that back to also is that the innovation, and that we also have a mythology that anything happens top down. It never does. There's never been cool innovation that has happened top down. Complete myth, never happened. Everything happens from the bottom up. And that's what I love too. Like Roots to Thrive chose specifically to be a nonprofit, right? That way our service is to the people that come through our program, period. Like, that's who we serve. Like, not only is the team healthy and taken care of, but then we focus all of that there. So Phil is the money guy. He keeps us like straight and narrow on this, but because of that, profits get to go back to scholarships. So people go through the program. That's a win. That's a win-win. All of us healthcare providers in the program feel great about what we're doing because we know we're serving the participants. And this goes back to, also, this is a bottom-up program. We tried to bring it into the system. We realized that most of the system is being run by people that are not courageous. They don't understand patients and what is needed to get patients well. And many of them are MBAs. So they've never been in service to humanity. They've been in service to money or business. And so when we took ourselves out of the system and turned it into the nonprofit, suddenly, like, this grassroots approach, bottom up, means everything's on the table. We can do everything. We can serve, we can innovate, we can publish, we can train. We have a really robust training program where people from all over the world come and train with us so they can take what we've learned back to their communities and do the same thing, like incredibly collaborative. And I think that is really important for people that are listening, is we lead from the bottom up so everyone can be a leader. So whether you're at a fire department that needs to change, it's going to start from the bottom up. It's going to start from the members demanding the change. Whether you're in a healthcare system in a state that needs to change, it's going to start from the bottom up, from a group of people coming together and say, let's pool our money and create our own healthcare HMO. That we have to just stop pretending people know, that people that are up here and that we oddly give the name leader to are not leaders. And it all happens from the bottom up, which is exciting, which means everybody watching can do something. Everyone can go, how can I make this world better? What can I do? Do not give away your power. And this is such a positive, pivotal time in history where never before have people had the opportunity to be more powerful, to be more innovative. And like we're living at levels of income we've never had before. Like it's crazy. We're living better than kings used to live. All of us, every single one of us, are living better than royalty used to live. So I'm incredibly optimistic, but I just wanted to put that out there. It's all grassroots. It all comes from the bottom, all innovation, everything. And so everybody out there has now once these words hit your ears, you now have the obligation to do something with it and go, how can I make my community better? Whether that's putting in a garden, helping a neighbor, advocating for mental health care, advocating for better food section in the grocery stores, whatever. Like, the sky's the limit if we all really lean into a little bit of our own personal leadership.
I always hate when I'm told, if you want to make change in the fire service, then promote, because it doesn't work, like you said. And it's funny because I've made the most change when I left the fire service and was outside the castle walls saying, all right, and then I'm starting to throw fireballs over the top. Now we're changing, now you're paying attention, but it's true. And then if you want to kind of circle around to what we were talking about earlier, if you are Richard Sackler, and you're the head of Purdue Pharma and OxyContin that was, forced on doctors, and they lied to them and told them it wasn't addictive. And now, as we sit here, 100,000 Americans die from opioids every year, and you sleep soundly in your bed, you're a sociopath, not someone to be revered in the business world. If you're the head of William Morris, if you're the head of, a weapons manufacturer, whatever it is, and your products are taking, hundreds of thousands of lives, millions of lives. Tobacco still kills 8 million people worldwide at the moment. And you sleep well in your bed, then you are a complete sociopath. So we have to also deconstruct, as you said, what is a leader? What is this, this person that we put on a pedestal? Because that's not. They're taking. It's the opposite of everything that all the holy books that you subscribe to is teaching you about. Kindness, compassion, empathy, community, service, gratitude. They are the antithesis of that. So I could not agree more. When we realize that we are the base of that pyramid, and, if we walk away, then everything crumbles, that's when you really force change. And it's even, like they say, vote with your dollar. If tomorrow no one ever bought a McDonald's burger again, McDonald's would collapse. I think that would be great personally, but yeah. So, but I think that the mysterious they have done such a good job of getting people to think that they are powerless, rather than realizing, as we see throughout history, when people have had enough and they stand side by side, I mean, they can topple governments, they can move mountains.
Yeah, grab the pitchforks.
And then the torches.
Throw the fireballs. The bottom-up mentality that Pam is talking about, in our first cohort, which was 2020, I think, 2019, 2020.
Early 2020, yep.
Yeah, we had 15 healthcare providers who came through our program that were suffering from burnout related to COVID. And we were trying to figure out, do we want to call them patients? Do we want to call them participants? But we decided on the term patient partner, And the intention there was they helped us build the program. So yes, they came in as patients, but they informed how we were going to run our program ongoing. And we continue to do that. We always gather feedback from participants. We have a team that reviews the feedback. And then we have a team that decides on what do we implement of the feedback. And it's like Pam mentioned, we constantly are in quality improvement on all levels of our program. And a lot of that is driven by participants in our programs. So participants have a voice in what we do, and it's a big voice. And we can't deliver on everything, but I'd say a good handful of things we absolutely implement. And I think that's part of the reason why our program has the results that we have, is because it's heavily informed by those that come through our program. And a lot of our team has also been through the program. So there's an embodied experience that each of them have. They've lived through what participants have lived through. They identify with it. They empathize, and they can meet them where they need to be met and hold them in that unconditional positive regard. So just really echoing that bottom up piece. And like a hospital they might have a comment box for, drop your comment in here and let us know how we're doing. Guaranteed 99% of them don't even get read, probably. But we have a comment box, and I mean, it's an electronic comment box, but yeah, we keep track of it, we implement it, and it's a huge win for us. Like we get to create a program that participants want, and one that works.
Well, I'll put this to both of you, whoever wants to answer this. You have, as you mentioned, the resilience program, and then you have the resilience program with the integrated psychedelic therapy. So talk to me about the two, and then give me an overview of what someone would experience if they went through.
Maybe I can talk about the overview, Pam, and then you can get the second part. So both programs are 12 weeks in duration. They run in parallel. So each participant is onboarded, so they get referred into our program by a family physician, psychiatrist, nurse practitioner. The resilience program is not a medical program, so it doesn't require a referral. But all participants are intaken with an intake nurse, and that's about a 45-minute intake. Really intentional in the questions that she asks. Really wanting to get to know the participant as best as we can. And Julia Sheffield is our lead intake nurse, and who's incredible at the role. Really meets participants where they're at and gets to know them so that we can place them in the proper small group. And we have a team that assists her in the placing of folks. If folks are participating in the psychedelic assisted therapy portion, utilizing ketamine, then they go see Dr. Pam just to make sure it's safe for them to participate in it, and they can ask any questions to the doctor at that point in time too. Once they're onboarded and go through the intake process, then we start the cohort. Cohorts range in size depending on the enrollment, but anywhere from on average 24 to 32 participants. And they're part of a small group, and it's usually 7 or 8 participants in a small group. And then they have 2 facilitators, a lead facilitator and a co-facilitator. And there's a weekly meeting that's virtual, Tuesday evenings from 6 p.m. to 8 p.m. The whole cohort gathers together as one. We're a community. We're intentional in how we gather. So the first, I'd say, 30 minutes of the 2 hours is everybody together, and there's some basic announcements that we make, but then the bulk of the time is spent more educational. So there's a topic each of the 12 weeks, and the topics are wide-ranging, but a member of our team speaks to the topic depending on the week. So this week was emotional conditioning and pathways of expression. And this was taught by Todd Haspect, who's a facilitator, and Wes Taylor, who's a facilitator. After that coming to know, we call it coming to know, the educational part, we do a pause practice, and that's just a transition from our heads to our bodies, creating some space to, we live so much of our life in our heads, kind of go, go, go mentality in the society we live in. So creating 5 or 7 minutes just to slow down a little bit. And that, what that does is biologically preps our bodies for more meaningful connection. So calming the nervous system, getting us prepped to go into the small group at that point. So on Zoom, then everybody goes into a breakout room and is with their small group at that point in time. And there's a question that each person, or a prompt that each person answers. And the prompt is connected to the topic that was spoken to when everybody was together in the large group. So there's 12 of those sessions throughout, so 12 weeks long. They're 2 hours in duration. And then on weeks 5, 7, and 9, we have the ketamine assisted therapy sessions. And those are, again, in your same small group that you meet with each of the 12 weeks. And the unique piece is whether you're in the resilience program or whether you're in the program with ketamine assisted therapy, everybody's mixed. So if you're receiving ketamine assisted therapy, let's say Pam's receiving it as well, and we're all in the same small group, and I'm not receiving it, we're still in the same small group, I would still be welcome to come to the ketamine assisted therapy session, participate in the experience, but just not receive the medicine. And that's a really unique piece, and a good handful of the resilience participants do come to those sessions and have very meaningful experiences. So that's a basic overview of the 12 weeks. Within the 12 weeks, there's lots of optional sessions that we offer as add-ons that are included. We have integration sessions after the Monday after the medicine sessions. We have, Pam mentioned Dr. Crosby Wattler, a psychiatrist. He offers different preparation and integration sessions for groups. Elder Geraldine Manson, a Snuneymuxw elder, she will do groups with Crosby as well, that are quite unique, where Crosby brings the Western knowledge in medicine, and then Elder Geraldine brings the more indigenous ways of knowing, and they weave beautifully, the two of them. They've got so much wisdom and knowledge. And then Helen Wattler, who's an energy worker who specializes in EFT or tapping, she does group tapping sessions. So it's almost like 2-3 nights a week. There's options for folks to drop in with us and step into the container and learn a new tool that they can implement in their day-to-day life. So that's the overview, just in a very quick few minutes there. And Pam, I'll pass to you to see if you want to add anything to what I said.
Yeah, what we really find is, a lot of, it sounds like a lot of words, and Phil did a great job explaining it, but what it's really doing is bringing people together, and they're starting to, we get harmed in relationship, we heal in relationship. So it's part of that too. So they're coming together as a group, realizing also that they're not the only ones with the problems they have. And they start forming, quite often with mental health challenges, as we start isolating, right? We move away from others when we really need to be moving in. And Roots to Thrive is all designed about getting people to move inward, lean in to all this. And so everything is so thoughtfully structured that it helps people build trust with each other, helps people start to be able to talk openly, be more vulnerable, and figure out where they're going, like what are their intentions for their own healing path and their own healing journey. And because they're traveling it with all these other folks that are equally suffering, there's an immediate healing effect there, that people start to go, oh, I'm not the only one. Like, I thought I was the only firefighter with PTSD. No, here I'm with 7 other firefighters and we're all saying the same thing. Like, I'm not crazy. This is real. This is not a weakness. This is no, like, they start to see how this is, as I said earlier, they're all having normal reactions to their life. And now they're starting to make friends. They're starting to make bonds. One of our participants said, and everything, like, I can't believe I came into this program and you gave me friends. Like, wow. But even before they get to their first psychedelic session, we're already seeing reductions in substance use. We're seeing reductions in anxiety. So it's already like the tools are starting to work. So they're creating a toolbox. And one of the other things that is really, we had to go online because of COVID, and we weren't totally sure it was going to work. But what we found is, because people are at home for the first 4 weeks of the programming, they're sharing what they're learning with their families and their kids. So they're kind of bringing their family along, as opposed to if they had just picked up and come to a retreat center and did the same thing. They're actually taking the conversation right back to their family immediately and right to their workplaces if they're still working. So we often hear from CEOs that come through our program, I'm already using the tools you're teaching me here in my boardroom. Mm-hmm. So you can see how, so there's all this magic in a way that's kind of happened early on. And then by the time they get to their psychedelic journey and they come on site, which is in person, it's like in their small groups of 8, they're already friends. They're already family. They're hugging. They're like, wow, they're already connected. And then they have this beautiful ceremonial psychedelic journey. And now, like, they're a team. They're really embedded in their own healing and each other's healing. And they know that the team is there for them too. Like, they really know that we care deeply that they get better and that we help them and we walk with them. And it's one thing that Phil didn't mention is it's also non-hierarchical. Like, we really try to get rid of that hierarchy, that the team is walking alongside them. Like, we are also challenged in our day-to-day lives. We also are still on our healing journey. And that is another feedback we get a lot, is like, it was so nice to be with healthcare professionals that were just like deeply vulnerable too. Mm-hmm. So as opposed to me, hey, I've got my doctor hat on and my life is excellent. No, like, some days my life sucks, mm-hmm. And we bring that in. And so what we see is this beautiful path through the 12 weeks of, some people make huge steps really quickly. Some people it's baby steps, but nonetheless, they all come through the program and they end up with friends and colleagues that they've traveled this whole path on. Many of them stay in contact. Many of them are friends. Some of the programs right from the beginning still meet. Some of the cohorts are still meeting on a monthly basis, and they're just talking about whatever's important to them. So, and as Phil said earlier, is we're a constant quality improvement project. So we never stop. So every cohort, every next group gets a better version than the previous group because we've improved it again. So innovation from the bottom up, really.
Yeah, the remarkable thing, which Pam alluded to, is so we have 5 weeks of 2-hour sessions in the beginning. Then they come to the first medicine session. So they're only together about 10 hours for the first 5 weeks. But when they come together face to face for the first time, it's like an old group of friends coming together, and they've never even met each other face to face. But it's highly intentional in how we structure it, and the ultimate intention of these groups is to co-create a space of unconditional positive regard. It's not us as the team creating it. It's not the participants creating it. It's all of us. It's the team and participants. And our team answers the same prompts that the participants do. Our team shows up in a vulnerable way, which is unique. And the typical mental health field, or the physicians, the medical field, doctors and therapists don't necessarily show up in a real vulnerable way, but we walk that line and we model it as best we can for participants. And that's another unique piece of our offerings.
One of the things that's become apparent to me when I hear people that have done the ketamine route is when there is success, it seems like they have an infusion, but they're also guided through that experience. When there is not success, it seems like every single time they're like, yeah, they put in the IV and then they walked out the room and they were just left with the ketamine. And I hadn't heard this for all the time I've been talking about this until literally a few weeks ago. One of my friends told me he went to a place. He certainly doesn't think highly of this place now, so I don't know, how reputable it was. But he got stuck in a K-hole during his experience, and he said basically he lived a lifetime in that K-hole, and it was traumatizing. And he actually told of a Navy SEAL who had a similar experience, had this whole family this entire lifetime. When he came out of it, he was so devastated that he'd lost this family that he basically had through his lifetime under ketamine, that he ended up taking his own life. So, that obviously is something that needs to be discussed. So what are you seeing as far as where this is safe and effective, and what are some of the cautionary tales to make sure people aren't going to the wrong place?
Yeah, I'm so glad you're bringing this up, because I forget that, and especially in the US, there's so many IV ketamine clinics. It is absolutely something we don't do. We don't do IV. We do intramuscular, and our sessions are incredibly ceremonial. So people come in, it's a beautiful room. There's in the small group sessions ahead of time, there's this predictability that is created of how we check in, how we start, how we share. And so when they come in person and they're in the ceremony room where the ketamine is happening, they're having the journey with their 8 folks in their group. So there's 8 of them plus the team. And so it's very ritual. And this has been very well taught to us by our elders and our Indigenous elders that have helped us co-create the ritual and the ceremony of the program, especially Elder Geraldine Manson. And so they come into this space where they feel held, they feel safe, and the team is there. No one is left alone. Phil curates these absolutely brilliant playlists that follow the arc of the journey. And people are, comfortably on their mats. We have weighted blankets. We have eye coverings, which follows our Nunamus teachings to be downward and inward, like to go inward. Music is on headphones, so participants can control the intensity of the music. The music is also playing in the room. And so, and then as the medicine comes on, like everybody is going into the medicine at the same time. There's this arc of the journey that they follow, and the team is there to support them in whatever is needed. Phil also mentioned we have somatic energy workers. So we have Eden-trained energy workers that are in the room to help people move things through. Plus of all of our facilitators are incredibly skilled. So no one's left alone. And then after, as everybody emerges and is out, then there's an opportunity for the integration to start. So that now there's some sharing. And then immediately in the days following, there's also numerous other opportunities to come back together as a group and share and start the integration. So this IV ketamine model, like any model of psychedelics without ceremony, without ritual, without predictability, and without a strong therapeutic wraparound, is a recipe, especially in the US, for malpractice and for, class action lawsuits, which we are seeing now against some of these companies. It's just, again, to pull out the shareholder value, and you would not see that happen. So, and that's why our numbers are so great. Like at 12 weeks, our numbers right now for people that come into our program who have PTSD at 12 weeks, 92% no longer qualify for that diagnosis. But that is not IV therapy. That is a solid wraparound program. We are co-creating the same healing container we would want if we were in that situation, right? So, and it's actually probably cheaper than what a lot of the programs are in the US. We had somebody come into our program that had done 30 IV sessions in California, and they came into our program. They said after the first ketamine journey with us in this ceremony, they had gotten more in our program right there than they had gotten in those 30 IV ketamine. So your friend is absolutely right. Like, you should not be working with groups that don't do solid therapy and help you, like, one, be safe during the journey, not left alone, but then also have solid preparation ahead of time and solid integration after time. It's a non-negotiable. It's a non-negotiable. Like, it is just absolutely malpractice to be doing it any other way.
What about the MDMA-led psychotherapy? I had Dr. Ben Sesser on a couple of times from Bristol, who's one of the people blazing the trail there. And the efficacy, again, with PTSD after just 3 treatments is phenomenal. But as I alluded to earlier with OxyContin, an FDA-approved drug, them trying to get MDMA, and recently they were refused by the FDA. So that, again, government corruption speaks volumes there. So talk to me about how you integrate that and the efficacy that you're seeing.
Yeah, we have to apply right now on a case-by-case basis for people to go through our program with MDMA, and it's been phenomenal. It's been phenomenal. What we really do well is really help patients go down the line that works best for them, whether it's ketamine, psilocybin, or MDMA. And another decision we made in our program a while ago is that all of our therapists have to be 5-star. And so we have a 5-star team. So our patients that go through the program, it doesn't matter what medicine they're working with, they are getting a solid therapeutic team that is going to work with them to get through whatever it is. MDMA has been incredibly successful in our program. We've had absolutely great successes. We hope to incorporate it even more in the future, but we have to apply for every person. Like I said, it takes a lot of work. I don't know if you want to say more about that, Phil, but we have a great team, and MDMA is fantastic. But the interesting thing is the MAPS MDMA studies, like their success rate at the high level is 67%, which is phenomenal, which is excellent. But what we're even seeing in our program with the ketamine is we're getting 92. So I think outside of the MAPS protocol, which hasn't really innovated, I think we're seeing higher numbers in our program because we've been able to innovate and not stay in a protocolized structure that they have to do in the clinical trials. So I think what we're going to see over time is when these medicines are fully available, is the best clinics are going to get even better outcomes.
Yeah. Yeah. And I was going to mention that, like, we primarily work with ketamine because it's legal, and it's a lot easier access for participants to come through and access it. MDMA works great for PTSD, and we see physical pain reduction, significant physical pain reduction for different folks. But it's hard to argue with the outcomes that we're seeing with ketamine within our resilience program, the 92% that Pam talked about. And ketamine is also a much shorter duration than MDMA, which leads to a much lower cost for participants. So a typical MDMA session is upwards of 10 hours, whereas our ketamine-assisted therapy sessions are 6 hours, 5 or 6 hours in duration. So you're looking at upwards of half the cost for a ketamine session with that 92% reduction in PTSD. And it's so easier access, lower cost, significant reductions. And as long as that's the case with ketamine, we will continue to use it until MDMA and psilocybin come on board and they're fully legal and whatnot.
I want to hit one more area, then we'll go to some closing questions so I can be mindful of your time. At the beginning, you'd mentioned a study specific to firefighters that you've been seeing. So talk to me about that.
Yeah, we had a bit of funding that came through that we were able to run through an open label firefighter cohort that came through Roots to Thrive. So, So we knew many firefighters had gone through our program. In fact, we've even had a firefighter facilitator train with us. And I think we have another one coming in the near future, possibly in the near future. But so they ran through our program and we just followed the normal. What we follow is depression, anxiety, and PTSD. And they did phenomenally, exactly what we expected. They ran through as a cohort. Quite often, other first responders are sprinkled through other groups where they're mixed with different professions. And it was really interesting, actually. When we looked at the data, one of the firefighters, his data was exactly the same from beginning to end. So after, we had to publish that as is. We couldn't But I phoned him up and I said, what happened? Like, you're doing so great. I don't understand. He goes, well, the week you sent us the measures, we had a firefighter suicide. So that was a shitty week for me, right? Which really just brought it home, like how much we need this. But even with his numbers not being as great, because that's what he was dealing with that week when he filled in all the validated assessments, we still had remarkable outcomes. And so what we also did is we published also their stories, the qualitative, like what was it like? What did they like? What other things did they notice that weren't specifically measured? So sleep was a huge improvement there. The camaraderie was they really enjoyed that. And what we're actually doing now to move the bar forward, we've got two projects going forward. One is we're actually because firefighters are having such a hard time getting access to these therapies. Like by the time firefighters finally raise their hand and say, I need help, they've needed help for a long time. Like most people don't put up their hand right away. And when they do put up their hand and then they try to get insurance to cover it, like workers' compensation, quite often they get sanctuary trauma. Like this is a group that's supposed to help them, and they don't. They put them through all this other stuff. There's in British Columbia, it can take up to 18 months for them to even get an assessment. I know, exactly. So we're actually doing, we've got a study that's in ethics right now that once we get our ethics approval, then we're going to be interviewing a ton of firefighters, and we're going to publish on that. And we're going to publish on it on purpose to move the bar, to say to workers' compensation, you're not doing the job you're paid to do. And that data will be able to be used. In fact, the International Association of Firefighters has been seeing all the studies we've been publishing and going, thank you. Like, this is helping. We can use your data to advocate. Well, really, to push the organizations that are supposed to be doing their job, to push them to do their job. So we're going to do that. And they're better. And then for anyone that wants to see some of that, the documentary Quiet the Sirens followed number of those firefighters through the Roots to Thrive program. So you get to hear it in their own words, what it was like and what it was done. The team there, Mike Bernard, I think, and Jesse Fraser, they did a phenomenal job. They did a phenomenal job, and we're absolute great storytellers. So yeah, we're going to keep doing that research to move the bar until firefighters get the therapy they deserve.
And there, in that research article, Pam, there was also a 6-month follow-up with the participants in the cohort. Is that right?
Yep. And the results are durable. That's what people ask. Yeah. Are they durable? But it's kind of a funny question to ask, because if you're still working, you're still experiencing trauma. So, what we should be saying is, actually, just change it a bit. We have an emergency nurse that came through our program who couldn't work. And then she came through our program and went back to work. And then she was funded as needed to go through the program, which from that time on, never lost a day of work. And she knew herself after so much time, she started getting nightmares. Then she said, hey, I need another session. Kept her at work, kept her healthy. So yeah, so that is another thing that our program does, is we try to follow all our participants out 4 years. So we're at 4 years right now, trying to show the people that make these decisions that these results are real. They're not just transient.
You mentioned Quiet the Sirens. Where can people watch that?
You can just Google it, Quiet the Sirens. It's a TELUS documentary in Canada. It's free. Anybody can watch it. Just if you Google it, you'll find it, and the link is online.
Yeah, the easiest way to find it would be to Google TELUS Quiet the Sirens, and I believe the domain is on telusoriginals.com. And then once you get there, you just want to look for Quiet the Sirens. Beautiful.
And what about Roots to Thrive? Where can people find that online?
www.rootstothrive.com. Or just search it, and that's the easiest spot to go.
Mm-hmm.
And you mentioned scholarships. If people listening maybe don't have the funds because, I don't know, they're a firefighter and they get paid like shit, how can they apply for that?
Well, yeah, we have an application process. So we have a participant navigator, a program coordinator, who they inquire on our website and then get connected with our participant navigator. And from there, they would just request this scholarship application and fill it out. And then we have a committee that reviews the applications. And if depending cohort to cohort, we have different amounts of funding that we're able to allocate. And we review the applications and reach out to folks who are eligible for it and offer them essentially a specified dollar amount. And the application is very easy. I think it's 2 pages, and just ask basic questions and to provide basic information. We don't need tax returns or anything like that. We keep it simple.
Yeah. And as a nonprofit, what happens is every donation that comes into Roots to Thrive goes into that scholarship bucket. So we have that. We have had some very kind philanthropists that have come through from time to time, and we have a long wait list of people waiting for scholarships. And so, like I said, we work really hard to get as many people through that as possible. So every dollar helps move that faster.
Yeah. By far the biggest barrier for folks to participate is funding. Mm-hmm. And each cohort, we start when we start onboarding participants, we start with about 150 to 200 people that have said, I want to do this. But it gets whittled down to 24 to 32 folks who can actually afford it. And so I think 99% of the barrier is financial for folks. The other 1% is medical or timing, or they're just not able to do it.
Yeah, which circles back to either, national healthcare coverage or a fire department realizing that it's a proactive investment in their people and helping them.
Yeah, and I want to put a number on that because the program, it costs 6,000 Canadian, which is about 4,000 American. The average cost of a firefighter off work to a department is 80,000 to $250,000, depending. Like, it's a no-brainer. Any program like that, the return is crazy.
Absolutely. Well, I want to thank you both. It's been such an amazing conversation. Again, I mean, I've had so many people on here that have got different dynamics when it comes to whether it's ketamine, MDMA, ibogaine, psilocybin, etc. But there's these reoccurring themes of what we're supposed to see as far as that integration, the kind of journey, the guided journey element to it. And, here we are presented with yet another incredible solution, especially for people up in Canada. So I want to thank you both for being so generous with your time and coming on the Behind the Shield podcast today.
Yeah, James, thank you. And thanks for the continued work that you're doing. It's important.
It's been fun to spend time with you, James. Thanks.